Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot-Nibelink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And in this podcast, Blake and I are going to talk about all of the biggest hot shots and have-nots of the last couple of weeks. Let's get it. And of course, I have your friend and my best friend, the chum who's good in a scrum. It's Blake Creamer. Blake, how are we feeling tonight?
Yes, sir. I feel good. You and I are both experiencing the dramatic, story arc of fantasy hockey tonight, as usual on these Sunday nights. Nate and I are preoccupied with our actual scores for our teams, and we got some stuff on the line here. So, yeah, this could be a happy pod towards the end, or it could be a sad pod at the end, or maybe an angry pod. I don't know. Which way are you kind of leaning there, Nate?
Currently I'm angry, but I'm 3.3 fantasy points away from being happy. So, it is very much still in the balance. Jonathan Huberdeau just scored a power play goal. Now I'm 3.3 points away. Any kind of point from here on out from Huberdeau would do it for me. So 2 more periods to go. 3-0 for Calgary after one. That's where we're at. So I'm sure by the time anybody's listening to this or watching it, they know how that happened. But yeah, that could be in play here for how the rest of this podcast goes, Blake.
That's right. Nate was very salty to start, but he softened a little bit, folks. So you're gonna, I think we're gonna see a pretty happy Nate Groot-Nibelink by the end here, folks. So yeah, we're excited. We got some good pieces to talk about, some bits and pieces.
Some bits and pieces and some newsies. Let's talk about it. Top of the list, Andrei Svechnikov. He missed Saturday's game because his uppy body was injured, Blake.
It's all injured. Oh, God. Where go with that?
RBA said it was more of a precautionary thing, I guess. That's hopeful. But yeah, tough to see. Svechnikov actually had a good game. We were hoping that this was a sign of better things to come for Svechnikov, and then all of a sudden the uppy body gets injured. So to keep an eye on that, but hopefully not too much of time missed for Svechnikov. Matthias Ekholm missed Saturday with an illness. Edmonton looked like they missed him, losing to the Leafs there. Ekholm has not really been himself for fantasy this year. I do think there's an underlying injury there. I was trying to find any sort of reporting on it. I swear I've seen reporting on him dealing with an underlying injury that he's just kind of working through this whole time. But honestly, as of late, he'd actually been kind of trending a little bit better. The shots had come up again a little bit. Things were seeming like they were turning around a bit. And then the illness hits him. It sounded like he had been starting to feel it in the previous game and then couldn't go on Saturday. But hopefully he comes back and he's good to go. Linus Ullmark taking regular reps in practice Saturday for Ottawa. They have sent down Levi Merilainen, I saw, even after his shutout there. So sounds like Ullmark is going to be back sooner rather than later for Ottawa. And this one might hit home a little bit for you, Blake. Matthew Barzal blocked a shot late in Saturday's game, and he is out here on Sunday. I haven't seen anything more than just he's out. But yeah, does that affect you? I know you're a big proponent of Barzal going into this year.
Oh, I love Barzal. I only have him in one spot, but it's going to affect Barzal. I mean, he's a pretty good skater, folks. And if you take a shot in the knee, you kind of need your knee to, properly function so you can get a nice skating stride. But actually, yeah, that's true. Not like I would know. I suck at skating. But yeah, I'm like Frankenstein out there. I actually watched a video of myself one time skating. I was like, dude, bend your knees. What the hell are you doing? I'm standing straight up like a freaking tree. But anyways, actually, I was going to mention there's this, and I'm going to screw this up because I don't have the man's Twitter handle, but there's a doctor on Twitter that people at sometimes like, hey, what do you think about this injury? And he'll give his sort of thoughts on the injury. And I wish I had that for you. I'd give that to all you folks here, but I don't, so I'm not going to. But anyways, he was saying about Barzal's injury that he thinks like he's actually really optimistic about it, and that it's probably more of a contusion rather than like, a broken bone or something like that. So I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but that man is, and I'm taking his word at 100%.
Dr. Grual
Oh,
on Twitter. Yep.
beautiful. There you go.
Cautiously optimistic
Shout that man
Barzal
out.
didn't break any bones, more of a contusion bruise, and he's day to day. That's
See,
the. I
that's
mean, Barzal did
better than nothing.
skate off. Like he didn't. It wasn't like a no pressure on the leg or anything like that. So yeah, hopefully not too long there. Josh Norris left Saturday's game, did not return. No update. Cole Reinhardt was recalled by the Senators on Sunday, so seems like they might be preparing for Josh Norris to miss at least a game. So keep your eyes peeled on that one. Oliver Ekman Larson left Saturday's game. Brube considers him day to day, needs more evaluation. And Dylan Gunther, he's really day to day now, Blake. Before he was just like he was day to day, but
It
now
was just
he's
indefinite.
really day to day.
Yeah, I love that, buddy. Get us Dylan Gunther back in our lives. This has been horrible.
It has been horrible. I am looking forward to him returning to one of my lineups as well. Moving on, Quinn Hughes tried to go Sunday but couldn't go. I'm getting a little bit of a Rupe Hintz flashback because I did clear a spot for Hughes to be in my lineup and then he didn't go. Yeah, you remember that when Rupe Hintz was like in and
Vaguely,
out
yeah.
every other game and it was like, yeah, it was truly awful to anybody
Like,
who's
guy didn't give a
rostering him there.
damn about our fantasy teams. I mean, and that's
Right?
selfish. That's absolutely selfish.
Yeah, hard to fault Quinn Hughes for anything he's done this year, given how he's put that team on his back for most of the year. But yeah, tough look there, and obviously you'll want to monitor that one moving forward. Hopefully, it's not a lingering thing, and he just needs to miss a game here and get it cleared up, and he's good to go. Troy Terry missed Sunday as well with an illness. Just watch and make sure it's nothing that lasts a little bit longer, but I wouldn't anticipate Troy Terry missing a whole lot of time. Might actually not be, that terrible of a thing for him to like miss the Tuesday heavy night
Yeah.
that Anaheim has, and maybe you get him back after that. So, might not be the worst thing for your fantasy squad in all likelihood. Tyler Toffoli missed practice on Sunday here with a lowy body injury and he's considered day to day now. So keep an eye out for Tyler Toffoli and any updates there.
Can you
I don't
tell
know.
we have young kids? Like, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, my sweetie, he's got a lowy body injury. Yeah. Oh, he's got a lowy body injury. I'm sorry about that. What were you? Sorry, I interrupted you, Nate. What are you saying?
No, I was just concerned that lowy body injury wasn't quite as good as uppy body injury. What did you think
Sounds
about
better.
that?
Yeah, I'll take the uppy over the lowy, but
Okay.
they both work, serve a purpose.
All right. Back to fantasy. Jonas Brodin is likely back Tuesday. Kaprizov was placed on LTIR, which probably means that they're doing a swap there. And it looks like Brodin is going to be back in the lineup. That's a general boost just for everybody on the Wild. Brodin, very underrated player in terms of how he just gets the play pointed in the right direction for the Wild. So that's a good look. And Philip Gustafsson, in particular, right, should be the primary beneficiary of Brodin back in the lineup. And lastly, here, Kirill Marchenko took a puck to the face in the game here on Sunday, did not return. He was on the bench when it happened, which is insult to injury, it feels like. But
Brutal.
yeah, I mean, in a scenario, normally you wouldn't think too much of this, but I mean, Mason Marchment just missed 4+ weeks with the puck to the face there. So, yeah, I mean, everybody who's had Marchenko this year has been reaping the rewards, and hopefully it is not a situation where he has to miss a lot of time. Anything else there, Blake, or anything you want to highlight?
No. Yeah, puck to the face. To the face. Oh my God. Please. Yeah, these injuries, man. Like he could have a fractured jaw. That's something that,
Yeah.
that would really stink. But it's kind of nice. All these injuries that come up, these little ticky-tack ones, we've got the Four Nations coming up. And I can imagine some players missing some time leading up to the Four Nations tournament just so they can get that extra little bit of rest.
Could be. All right, let's move along then, and let's get into the hot shots.
Oh yeah.
Basically, we'll start this thing off with everyone on Winnipeg. The top six absolutely going off. Neil Pionk on the back end, Josh Morrissey on the back end. Like, who is not firing on all cylinders in Winnipeg? It feels like they can't keep getting away with this, Blake.
You're getting lit up, and I'm here for it, buddy. I wish I was a Winnipeg fan. This is awesome. They remind me of the Canucks last year. Only, yeah, like I think they're a little bit more sustainable. I mean, they're obviously their PDO is going nuts this year. they got Hellebuck, so that's going to happen. But yeah, their shooting percentage at all strengths tops in the league. So yeah, we're looking at a really efficient team here. These guys are popping off.
Yep. Yeah, second in the league in PDO all strengths is Winnipeg this year. There's some interesting things to highlight here. Like, I guess the most interesting thing is to try to identify who's the most unsustainable, right? Like,
Yep.
who, obviously, all these guys, by the metrics we look at, they look pretty unsustainable, right? So, who's the most unsustainable? Who's the least likely to continue on at this pace? I think for me, it's a mixture between Velarde and Shifley. I think Connor's probably the most sustainable out of the top guys there. Ehlers has a 16.2% on ice shooting percentage. So, yeah, that feels a little bit unlikely. I'm rooting for Ehlers. I took him at plus 800 to score 30 goals this year. He's on a 29 goal pace,
Let's
but he
go.
also missed some games. So he's going to have to really ramp it up here. He could give up some of the points scored. I don't need the assist, Nikolai.
Just goals, buddy.
Nikolaj.
Put the biscuit in the basket.
Yeah, Cole Perfetti, 7 points in his last 5 games. He deserves a shout out. 10th in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. I still dropped him this week. He's not going to get in my lineup.
As did I.
Yeah, so it's a tough look, but somebody had to go, and Perfetti was that guy for me. I feel like he's just as likely to go cold on the season. The metrics aren't nearly as good. So, yeah, is there anybody that you particularly want to highlight from this wagon on Winnipeg here, Blake?
You know what? Like I agree with you. It's Shifley and Velarde to me are running a little bit too hot. And I love that Connor is the one that you think is sustainable because he's the one popping off. He's on a 102-point pace. But I did want to shout out Vladislav Neminstikov. Well, the only reason being is I'm just looking at Mark Barber's model here, his expected goals and expected assist model here. And over the last couple of weeks, it's Neminstikov who's leading the entire team. Like he's got an expected goals and expected assists. Like he's creating the most offense of all of those players in Mark's model, right? That said, I think he's on power play 2. He's line 2. So you got to factor that in. But this is a guy that's actually doing stuff. And I think that says a lot about the players that he's playing with. Cole Perfetti, who's popping off for 7 points in the last 5, and Nikolai Ehlers, right? Doing stuff out there. So I think, if you're going to stream a Winnipeg player in, Neminstikov is absolutely reasonable. And I think he's doing really well at the moment.
Yep, I think that's a fair shout out. Also getting about a minute and a half more in the last 5 games than he has on the season. So, yeah, a little bit more ice time to the second line there in Winnipeg, which is nice to see. Probably a little bit of function of Adam Lowry being out as well. So keep that in mind too. Yeah, I'll go back to Kyle Connor for a second. I don't want to give the impression that I think Kyle Connor's 15.8% on ice shooting percentage is sustainable necessarily, but I think he's the most sustainable of those three because I do think he's the most talented player there and he's getting the most ice time as of late. So, yeah, there's that. But yeah, I think that Connor, he's on a 102-point pace. I think he's probably going to score at maybe a 90-point pace rest of season. Like, it's still going to be very, very valuable for you. All right, let's keep moving then. Let's move on to Dallas. And they've been doing the thing as of late, especially Rupe Hintz, Jason Robertson, Wyatt Johnston, the guys that we thought would be doing stuff. They're doing this stuff on Dallas.
That feels
Who
good.
would have thought? Rupe Hintz has 3 goals, 8 points. Robertson and Johnston both 4 goals, 8 points. Wyatt Johnston's still getting the most ice time there, just over 19 minutes. Rupe Hintz just over 17. Robertson 17 and a half. Wyatt Johnston continues to have the best underlying metrics, 26 shots per 60, 12th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. He's 10th in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60 on the year. And now all the way up to a 24-goal, 71-point pace on the season after he spent most of the year being a pretty big buy low, which I believe we may have highlighted here on this podcast, Blake, believe it or not. Yeah, where are you at with Dallas in general? Where are you at with Hintz, Robertson, Johnson? Anybody you want to really shout out here?
Well, I love this top line. So it's Robertson, it's Wyatt Johnston, and who's the other guy? Dang it. It's I'm losing my mind. Who's on the top line with Robertson? I'm just drawing a blank right here. I love that top line regardless. It's Robertson, it's Wyatt Johnston, and they're popping off. Like Wyatt Johnston, I read a tweet today that he's on like a 103-point pace since January. Like he's really going nuts, and he's getting the ice time, and all those scoring chances are now being converted. That's something that Johnston does so well is the individual scoring chances for. So I'm a big fan of that. But yeah, I feel like those guys are getting back to where we need them to be. They had such a rough start. I mean, what is the point paces here? Like 79 for Robertson, 71 for Johnston. So I feel like if they finish with that, that's fine. I think Robertson has a little bit higher than that. I think we could see point per game for him and maybe just a touch above. I like that. So great players there. To me, Hintz is the one I'm a little bit concerned about. Obviously, he's going off of massive efficiency again, like especially the last 5 games, shooting 33%. Buddy, what are you doing? He's been moved off the top line, and he's on power play too. So that's, for fantasy, it's not great, but it's working out really well in reality, right? He's great
Yeah.
shorthanded. He's got amazing speed, and yeah, he's just a really great player, and he has a lot to offer defensively to this Dallas team. But his current deployment is not giving me a lot of faith that he's going to be like kind of that 70 to 75 point player that maybe we predicted at the beginning of the year. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Dallas Stars there?
Yeah, so first off, in the game here today, it was Hintz, Robertson, Johnson as the top line altogether.
Oh, with first one with Granlund in there. Yeah, they hit him on line 3.
Yeah, so they
Yeah,
had
it was
Granlund
Dadonov.
in and
That's right.
Marchment is back, so definitely threw the lines into a blender a bit, but it was Dadonov, yeah, for a long time with Robertson and Wyatt Johnson. So it's a good spot for everybody right now. We like that, but also with people coming in, it's probably going to mean more of the same in Dallas, more of a top 9 situation, more of an even spread in ice time. Johnson continually gets more ice time by virtue of penalty killing, primarily. Although Rupe Hintz does that as well,
Hits
so
too. Yep.
he gets himself out there. But yeah, overall, yeah, Johnson is the one I'm actually the most looking at the most favorably, just because of those underlying metrics. I think I would take him in point pace over Robertson rest of season at this point, personally.
Love that. Yep.
I mean, he's getting more minutes, has all year long, almost a minute and a half more, and his metrics are significantly better pretty much across the board, except for the on ice stuff. But also, a lot of that was earlier in the year when he wasn't playing with the top guys. So, yeah, I think I would take Wyatt Johnson point pace over the other guys. I do agree Hintz is the one I'm most worried about sustaining this kind of production moving forward. Move over to Buffalo. Top line there has been popping off as of late. That's been Tage Thompson, JJ Peterka, Yuri Kulich. And yeah, we can run down their stats in the last bit here. Thompson obviously leading the way, 5 goals, 9 points in his last 5. Peterka, 4 goals, 7 points. And then Yuri Kulich has 3 goals and 4 points. Yeah, Tage Thompson hasn't even been skating that much ice time, like just
Yep.
under 17 minutes here. They haven't really needed him to. 44 shots per 60, 37th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. Peterka, 28th in shots per 60, but 251st in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. Interesting stuff. Really feels like Peterka has finally started to deliver on all that promise that made him such a popular sleeper pick at the beginning of the year for pretty much everybody and their grandmother. And the interesting piece here is Coolidge. We'll get into that a little bit later. Tage Thompson did actually, we didn't mention in Newsies because it sounds like he's all right, but he did take a really dirty hit from Stefan Nason. Wasn't even touching the puck. Nason touches the puck, tries to throw an elbow in his face, tags him,
Gross.
but looks like Thompson is going to be okay, and that's a big relief for Buffalo as they've actually been kind of cooking here the last little bit. So good to see that. What's your temperature on Buffalo? Are you interested? You know, we've talked about Buffalo having a solid playoff schedule. Paterka, Kulich, these guys. Are you interested for your playoff run?
Yeah, absolutely. I watched the game today a little bit, and this line here is really cooking. They've got some serious chemistry. JJ Peterka, Yuri Kulich, and Tage Thompson, they were running house out there. Tage was leading the charge. And you know what's neat about Tage? He's an underrated playmaker. Like, we know this guy's a shot monster, but he made 2 beautiful passes for easy tap-in goals for these guys. And I just really like what I'm seeing there. My only concern with Buffalo is they're running hot with their conversion, right? They're
Mhm.
really efficient as a team, and I don't really like that. You know what I mean? It's like, even if you look at what we're dealing with here in the last 5 games with Peterka, Thompson, and Coolidge, like Peterka is shooting 23.5%, Tage is shooting 33%, Coolidge is shooting 23%. That is not sustainable. Those are going to come down, folks. So, I mean, don't expect all these goals all the time. That said, I mean, guys like Dylan Cousins, Alex Tuck, not really converting to the level that you want. So maybe there's a balance there. But the other thing with Buffalo too is they're not a very good team. They're out of the playoffs right now. So what does that team look like when it does come to your fantasy playoffs? Are they resting guys? Are they prioritizing other guys? It's in the back of my mind. I'm not saying do anything with that information, but it's kind of it's just in there, right? But this game here, they were clearly the better team. They looked really, really good. I'm actually surprised where they are in the standings based on what I saw here today.
Yep, I think that's a good assessment there. It's going to be tough to necessarily hang on to Paterka and Coolidge the entire time in some spots because, it's unlikely that they stay this hot the entire time. There's probably going to be a point somewhere between now and the start of your playoffs where you're like, I don't know if I'm willing to hang on to these guys right now. So there is probably that moment coming for you. I mean, it could be this week. Buffalo, the schedule that we were talking about, it's a tough week to be hanging on to Buffalo players. So, yeah, it could be as soon as this week. And if you're scrapping and clawing to make it into the playoffs, like you got to make it to the playoffs for the
Yeah.
playoff schedule to
Yeah.
matter. So, definitely keep that in mind. And like we always talk about, the buy is far more important to me than any individual player and having one individual player with a really great playoff schedule. So, yeah, if you're in play for a buy in your league, then I would prioritize that over any individual player. But that being said, yeah, if you got Paterka or Coolidge at the moment, you're probably feeling pretty decent about it.
Oh
Over to
yeah.
Anaheim, we got Mason McTavish showing out in the last little bit. 6 goals, 7 points in his last 5 games, about 16 and a quarter. Average time on ice through that span, 54 shots per 60, ninth in shot attempts per 60, 111th Corsi for per 60, 224th in on ice scoring chances for per 60. The Greg Cronin effect is well and alive with Mason McTavish. 23 goal, 48-point pace for McTavish on the season now in his 46 games played. What's your expectation for McTavish? Do you think this is a player, kind of coming of age finally? Do you think that, he might be somebody that you can rely on? We talk about Anaheim having those off nights, and that'll continue to be true through the rest of the season here. But do you think that McTavish is a guy you can rely on now, or are you willing to move off him? Anaheim doesn't have the greatest schedule this particular week upcoming. So is he a player, if you can't get him in on the Tuesday and Saturday super heavy nights this week, they only have those 2 games. Are you
Yeah.
dropping McTavish this week?
I think I would, to be honest. Like it's more the deployment. It's deployment based than it is with this other stuff here. But to your first part of that question, like, yeah, this guy is absolutely a player that I would rely on. And I think he's kind of first up when you're looking at an Anaheim streamer. And if you did hold him through a 2-game week, I don't think that's a whiff. I don't think you need to drop McTavish. Like, look at what he's doing, right? But keep in mind, 6 goals in 5 games, that's on 43% shooting. Okay. So yeah, it's simple stuff, but he's not going to be able to maintain that, right? One thing I did like is he was on power play 1 here, this game here, like the true power play 1. Obviously, we had Troy Terry out of the lineup, so we need to see what goes on there. But yeah, that's a good data point as well. Like if one of these guys is out on the top power play, McTavish bumps up. They also had Zegras up there. So I don't know. It's Anaheim is a weird team, and I feel like they're kind of just going to be experimenting and trying different things throughout the rest of the season. So, that's in the back of my mind there. But in terms of players that I'm interested on Anaheim, it's going to be Vetrano, Zegras, McTavish, and Terry, really. And I think that's going to be it. And Jackson Lacombe.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I myself will drop Mason McTavish in spots where he's just simply not going to make my lineup this week. In deeper leagues, yeah, maybe that's not the case, but yeah,
Yeah.
overall, I don't think you need to feel too bad about that. The Ducks are, right now they're, I think, what is this, sixth from the bottom in the NHL standings, so they're in contention for a really high draft pick here. I think that's the only reason Greg Cronin still has a job is they're going to let him ride this one out, get one
That's
more
why he
good
was
draft pick.
hired, just to
Yeah,
tank. Yeah, just to piss people off, give them their worst performances.
yeah, I do think that Cronin has gone after this year, and the Ducks really try to begin their push for the postseason in earnest. And I think McTavish can be a big part of that, and you're seeing a little bit of it come to fruition here.
Mhm.
But I do think that they're going to have to figure out what the rest of that team looks like and figure out who the coach can be that can take them to that next level. But it is nice to see. I think this is honestly more a data point for next year than it is like a super actionable point to say, hey, McTavish is now like a guy I'm going to hang on to for the rest of the year. Kent Johnson, 2 goals, 6 points in his last five, just under 17 minutes average time on ice, 303rd in shots per 60, 346th individual scoring chances for per 60, in the 200s in the on ice numbers. I think one of the problems with Kent Johnson right now is like he's playing with Cole Sillinger and James Van Riemsdyk at even strength. With all due respect, those are not guys who are going to raise your, 5v5 numbers to unreasonable heights. And so Ken Johnson has relied on the power play to really help him boost his numbers. And he's been able to do that. And I don't want to discount that, but, he's also shooting 20.3% on the year, 13.9% on ice shooting percentage.
Yep.
Been quite efficient to be on the pace that he's on, 34 points in 39 games. Yeah, really like what he's doing, but it does feel pretty unsustainable to me. For me, Kent Johnson is still pretty much in the streamer territory, especially with, you got Boone Jenner's return looming. You got Monahan, might be a little longer now, but at some point, does he return? What's your temperature on Kent Johnson? I know you were higher on him than me at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think I'm still higher, actually. Like, I think even with Boone Jenner coming back, I think Johnson's role is secure. They're putting him in positions to succeed. And we've talked about this with Dmitry Voronkov and Kirill Marchenko and Dean Evison. Dean Evison has really kind of leaned into his offensive players and sort of let them get to business, right? And Kent Johnson is no different. And he's really been cooking. This is clearly a guy that is very skilled offensively. Chance assists, shot assists. I mean, usually this guy's good to go. He's actually weirdly not having that good of a year in those metrics as he has had previously. So that said, like you said, the power play, he's starting to cook there. And one thing we need to keep in mind with Kent Johnson too, if Marchenko misses any time, Johnson was the one who moved up on that top line. So it was Johnson, it was Fantilli, and it was Voronkov as the top line there. So yeah, I think this guy is going to be in the mix there. He's a top six player, power play one, and I think he should probably be on a roster. 70-point pace, maybe not, but 60-point pace, Ken Johnson, I think that's probably reasonable, right? Although these goals should probably go away a little bit, right? Because his shooting percentage is high.
Yep. No, it's a good shout on him potentially moving up to line one if Marchenko does miss any time. Yeah, he's going to have to get more ice time, right? Like he's still at least a minute and a half behind everybody on that top line there. And
Yep.
so that keeps him back in the streamer range for me. He's just continually been very efficient. And I'm just always going to bet against that kind of profile because it is so hard to maintain, like to be that efficient time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is a good shout that if he does end up on line one as well for any length of time, then that definitely raises his profile. Marco Casper here, he's got 3 goals, 5 points in his last five, 17 and a half minutes average time on ice. 116 shots per 60, 65th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 71st in Corsi, 4 per 60, and 45th in on ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. Detroit is playing Vancouver, getting towards the end of that game right now. Marco Casper has not pointed in this one, so no update there. How many shots do we get here from Marco Casper? Just one shot in this game here today. But he has had a few games here and there. He's obviously playing on the top line with Larkin and Raymond, who are also having a really good stretch of games here before the Vancouver game here tonight. So, what's your temperature on Casper? Do you think that there's something here? Do you think this is just a player who's, third wheeling it and getting hot because Larkin and Raymond are so hot at the moment? Or what do you think we should be evaluating? Casper did also get, a quick look on the top power play unit with Patty Kane out of the lineup there. So,
Yep.
like him being next up there is definitely a good look for him. He's back off it here tonight with Patrick Kane back in the lineup. Kane goes right back on power play one as expected. But yeah, what's your temperature on Marco Casper? Are we at least seeing a vision of who he could be at the NHL level?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both, right? Like he's third wheeling it right now, no question, right? He's tagging along with Larkin and Raymond, who are both really good players and having great seasons in their own right. But this is a guy that can do stuff on his own too. I feel like we're getting just a glimpse of what this player is going to be like in 3 or 4 years, right? And he kind of came out of nowhere for me. I know he's in the system there, and I'd heard the name before, but to see him getting these kind of offensive minutes and chances and sort of doing something with it, I really like that. And I think that bodes well for him in the future. But I mean, Detroit has a 2-game schedule next week. I don't think you're not holding on to Marco Casper, especially with Kane coming back. Like, I don't think they've had a power play in the Vancouver game yet, but Kane's going to be on that power play, not Marco Casper. So it's just a data point. It's just a data point that this is a guy that they're sort of earmarking for an offensive role on this team. And if anything happens, he's in the mix to do that. So yeah, I'm all that to say, like, I think that he's still a streamer level guy. Like who actually, this is kind of interesting. Who would you take? Would you take Marco Casper or Yuri Kulich?
I would
Because
take
they're kind of
Coolidge
similar
at
to
the
me.
moment.
You take Kulich,
Yeah.
yeah, because he's a bit more consistent on his line, right? And he's been able to pop off for a little bit more, but I don't know. I think they're comparable players.
Yeah, interesting point there. We'll talk more about Coolidge later, as I mentioned. Casper, I just don't know if I trust trust the offensive upside there. Even when he was coming out as a rookie, I remember the talk was, he's a little bit more of like a do everything guy than like a true elite offensive talent. Last year in the AHL, he scores 14 goals, 35 points in 71 games.
Yep.
Eighth overall pick in 2022, so he does have that going for him for sure. But yeah, I feel like it's probably a bit more a function of just how hot Larkin and Raymond have been together and him getting in on those points than necessarily him really showing us some kind of elite offensive ceiling. you know, can he be potentially like a 60-point player at some point for the Red Wings in the future? Yeah, I think maybe he can be that guy. But do I think that we're getting a glimpse of him being like a point per game guy rest of season on the top line with these guys? No, I don't think that's what we're seeing here. Yeah, I'd be fully willing to drop him with the bad schedule for Detroit this week. Moving over to Ottawa, Jake Sanderson missed one game with lower body injury, and that cleared up everything that was ailing him because he comes back and posts 2 goals, 8 points in 4 games, averaging just over 23 minutes, 12th in shots per 60 amongst all defensemen in that span. Now you look up and he's on a 6 goal, 53-point pace on the season. And you know what? That doesn't feel too out of the range of possibility for Jake Sanderson, given the deployment this year for him. What's your temperature on Sanderson? Obviously, this 2 points per game pace is not going to sustain here, but how about the 53-point pace on the season? How does that feel to you?
It feels a little high to me. That this guy kind of gives me the like Owen Power vibes. You know what I mean? Like he's great. He's done well in juniors, and he's coming up and he's making a difference. Like Owen Power is a good defenseman as well, right? Jake Sanderson brings a lot to the table defensively for this team. He's really a glue guy on Ottawa. And just keep in mind, like 4 of these points that we're talking about were they had a 5-minute power play and they scored 3 goals on that power play in this game. So, and Sanderson was doing stuff out there, right? So I think that's a little bit of fool's gold, but he's going to be the guy on power play 1. That's not going to change. He's clearly taken over that role from Thomas Chabot. He's not getting it back. So, I mean, 50-point Jake Sanderson seems like probably reasonable to me. 50 points is where I would sort of place him moving forward. But I mean, this is kind of a nice pick. He's shooting a little bit low, like 3.5 shooting percentage. I think there's a little bit of room there for him to pop some more goals. This is a guy that got 10 goals last year in 2023-24, which is pretty dang nice. So I think he's running a little low there and probably running a little hot with his on-ice shooting percentage and other things there. So all that to say, 50 points, Jake Sanderson, book it. I think this is a great pick that you probably got at major value in draft season. And yeah, power play 1 quarterback. You've talked about that before, drafting power play 1 quarterbacks a little bit later and kind of reaping the rewards.
Yeah, I think he can fit that profile. I tend to agree that I just think Jake Sanderson is not like an elite offensive talent. He's a terrific skater, which I think, Brock Faber also kind of falls into that
Yeah.
category as like a player that everybody thinks should score a lot of points because he looks so good on the ice. I think that Sanderson maybe falls into that category a little bit as well. I
Mm-hmm.
think Sanderson's probably got a little bit more upside than Faber personally, but yeah, it's a good spot for him. Obviously, he's the guy now, fully taken over that from Thomas Chabot, and it's a good look. But yeah, 50 points ish feels like an accurate representation of what we should expect Sanderson to do rest of season. All right. moving along, gotta talk about the Patreon for a moment here. $2 a month gets you access to patron only live shows. Won't be this week here, but it will be the week after. We will have a patron only segment. So get ready for that and get into the supporter tier if you want to catch that live. $8 a month tier, the Apples tier gets you the patron only live shows, gets you access to patron only Discord channels as well, and also gets you access to our show notes for the flagship show and the waiver wire show, and also gets you access to the Apples and Geos player evaluation tool. Really useful for checking out who's been doing what as of late on the season, what the point paces are, everything in a neat package so you can compare players, make your add drop trade decisions as you will. For the true degenerates, the Genos tier exists. $15 a month gets you all the previous perks mentioned, plus every single question you care to ask, guaranteed to be answered by yours truly. Blake, are you ready for the have-nots?
I can't wait, buddy. Let's get to biz.
All right, the have-nots. We got to start off in Los Angeles with Adrian Kempe and Anze Kopitar, both 0 points in their last 5 games. Actually, I may go back further than that. I haven't even checked. Let's check on Kempe. Kempe, it is five games. Yeah, Kempe,
6
it
for
is 5
Kopitar.
games. 6 for Kopitar. All right. Yeah, suffice it to say, it's been a little rough for both these guys. I will say Kempe still shooting the lights out. 14th shots per 60, 21st individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 23rd Corsi 4 per 60, 90th in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. And I mean, on the season, it's a 39 goal, 72 point pace. That's probably what you're expecting for Kempe. He's probably just run a little bit hot before this, and now he's kind of settled back into where he should be. That would be my take on Kempe. I wouldn't read too much into this cold streak. I think it's probably just a bit of bad luck. Kopitar is somehow this guy who just gets more efficient every
Yeah,
year
he's
as
unreal.
his on ice product seems to decline by the numbers. I don't know if I can reasonably doubt him anymore, but 20 goals, 71 point pace. Do you think that sustains, Blake?
It's in the wheelhouse. I think 65 to 70 is probably where Kopitar lives. Like his numbers right now is 71 point pace in this cold streak that he's on. The LA power play is garbage this year. It's been terrible. So, I mean, now we got Drew Doughty back in the mix. And I think that once Doughty gets his legs, we're going to see a better product out there on the ice. I think that's going to be a net positive for all these guys. So, yes, I mean, 71 points. How does he keep doing this? It's crazy. The man barely shoots. He doesn't do that, but he's got a guy like Kempe out there doing all the heavy lifting there. So, needless to say, I think you got Kopitar at massive value in draft season, or you might have picked him up off your waivers. Like this guy's just found money, so you roll with him, right? Unless you know things are getting desperate, and then you could punt Kopitar. But LA has a good schedule next week. You're loving life. You're rolling with Kopitar. I think there's always the potential that they're going to start popping off here real soon, especially with his access to Kempe and just how smart of a player he is. And he's such a good penalty killer, although he's doing a little bit less of that this year. Like, there's some potential shorthanded points in there as well for Kopitar. So, yeah, 65, 75 points for him. And I agree with you on Kempe. I think that last year he had 75 points and 77. I feel like that's kind of sealing Kempe, at least with his current roster construction of the LA Kings and sort of their play style. So 72 point Kempe, I think that's right in the wheelhouse. That's where he should live. And I do think this power play will be a little bit better, like I said, with Drew Doughty back in the lineup.
Yep. I tend to agree with all of that. Um, the the power play is a concerning piece, I guess. I tend to think they'll figure it out. They do have talent there. Like
Yes.
they have guys who have done it before, which is sometimes something that you look for, right? Like it's not like they're casting around trying to find the right group of guys and new coach or something. Like none of that is the case really here. So it does feel like they should figure it out at least to a usable extent, if not like a barn burning extent.
Totally.
So tend to agree with that there. Let's talk about Matvey Michkov. Once a much ballyhooed Calder candidate, now has not scored a point in his last 6 games, only has 1 shot in his last 4 games. The ice time has completely fallen off. Philadelphia has been shut out in 3 straight games.
Yeah.
They cannot buy a goal right now. And, in typical Torts fashion, the way to avoid scoring goals is to get your most dynamic player off the ice. So that's what Matvey Michkov is doing, riding the pine, 13 minutes average time on ice last 5 games. He's still on a 54-point pace on the season. What do you think we should do with Michkov moving forward?
I don't know what you can do. You have to hold like based on this offensive player ceiling, right? I mean, if things are getting desperate, then yeah, sure, you can bump Mishkov off there. Like this ice time is atrocious. You can't rely on that. We need a guy to be on the ice in offensive situations, and he's getting the torch treatment, right? And that was always our concern with Mishkov. It's not the player. Like if this guy was on San Jose, we'd be looking at like a 70-point season here.
Yeah,
Probably pretty easily. So
yeah.
and we've talked about this before. Torts is probably doing the right thing. Like I can't even get mad at the guy. I get mad at him for fantasy, but yeah, this guy is a young kid. Torts is trying to show him the finer points of the game so he can have a long career, right? And I'm here for that, I guess. But this is one of the main reasons, the main reason I wasn't in on Mitchkov to start the year, and I don't see it really getting better anytime soon. Like is he all of a sudden going to start putting him out there for 17, 18, 19 minutes a night? Like, is he going to shore up his defensive game that much? I don't think so. So I think we're, it's going to be an interesting situation there in Philly, especially because they just bounced Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee out of there. Like, who are they going to be prioritizing out there? Is Travis Konecny going to play like 25 minutes a night?
I think he already was, wasn't he? So,
They got
I mean,
26 now. Dear God.
yeah, it's definitely a tough spot. I mean, I fall towards a bit. I don't. I think it's there. It's one thing to like bench a guy for a bit. It's another thing to like not let the rookie play the game and
Mm-hmm.
learn the game. And I think we're at that point now where he's literally not allowing him the ice time he needs to play and learn how to play at the NHL level. And plus, you haven't literally have not scored in 3 games, and your most dynamic offensive player is not playing the game. So, yeah, I would fault him a bit for that. Um, there's got to be some
Mm-hmm.
balance there, and it feels
Yep.
like that's the problem with Tortorella is that he doesn't have that balance to him, and it's all the way off the off the wall one way or the other all the time. So that would be my take on the situation for whatever it's worth. Michkov, tough roster right now.
Yep.
Yeah, another reason I wasn't that interested in picking him where he's going in fantasy drafts this year. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Konechny's feels like the only guy that you can just hang on to there and not have to worry about. Everybody else is like he's just as likely to be on the bench by the second game of the week when you pick him up. So feels like the same for Michkov as well. Steven Stamkos next up, 1 goal in his last 5, just over 17 and a half minutes, average time on ice. This is a bit of a puzzler. Uh, we were talking about it a little bit before, Blake. How can they not figure this out with the kind of characters that they've assembled this year? They add Marchessault and Stamkos, and somehow they get worse. Doesn't make any sense to me. And Stamkos in particular, like he's playing
Mm-hmm.
with Marchessault and Forsberg. This is a really good spot to be. We've talked about how Forsberg's underlying metrics have been insane all year long.
Yep.
It's clearly not his fault. So, what do you think about Stamkos? Do you think better is coming? What is the temperature here? 27 goal, 51 point pace for Stamkos.
Yeah, better is coming for sure. I cannot see him finishing with the 51-point season. It doesn't make sense. I mean, Nashville in particular, they're fifth overall in the league in shots for, right? Fifth overall. They're dead last in goals for. That's horrible. They cannot finish. They can't hit the broadside of a barn. This is nuts. So that's going to come up, especially with the roster they've assembled here. But there is something about this team. Like it's hard to put your finger on, but who would have thought that they would be, dead last or around the bottom of the league in goals for when you've got guys like Stamkos coming in here, Marchessault, you already had Forsberg, you've got Yossi, right? You've got even good young players like Evangelista and Novak, and they can't put the biscuit in the basket. And there's something off there. And I wonder what Andrew Burnett's role is in this. Like that's a coach that you and I have both been kind of lauding a little bit as kind of an innovator, a guy that, is a really good coach in the league. Well, he sure got his work cut out for him here. I can't put my finger on it as to what's going on here, but just looking at the raw numbers here, I feel like this is not sustainable to be this low for Stamkos in particular. And we've seen him throughout the year. He had a little hot streak there where he was putting some points on the board, and now 4 straight games with donuts, right? I just think that we got to trust the talent of the player. He hasn't forgotten how to play hockey. And yeah, this is a buy low. I think it's not a great buy low. I mean, I'm not rushing out to try and get Steven Stamkos, but I think, if you can get him for a lower level roster player, someone might do that. And this is a guy that has a potential to get back up to like a point per game pace.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go all the way to point per game, but definitely deserves better. Like on the season, 17th in Corsi 4 per 60 and 18th in on ice
Mm-hmm.
scoring shits is 4 per 60. So
Yep.
like the on ice numbers alone dictate that he should be doing much better than this. 55% IPP, that would be by far the lowest of his career. So
Yep.
I think that's part of it too. The one part that does give me pause is the fact that he's actually playing center now, which is not something he's done for much more than a few games at a time here or there in Tampa the last few years. And so that part does have me wondering, is Stamkos really cut out to be a center? Is he, trying to play a responsible defensive game and that's getting in the way of him being involved in some point scoring at even strength? Maybe there's something to that that I'm not trying to discount here, but I definitely agree. He deserves far better than what he's gotten so far. All right. Let's move along. Jonathan Huberdeau is on the list here. Ironically, Huberdeau is exactly who I need to pop off here in this game.
One more
like,
goal, buddy. Come on.
yeah, he's already got a power play goal. I need something more from him here in the back half, but we'll see how it goes against Seattle here tonight. But like playing big minutes, 20 minutes a night here, only has the one assist in the last 5 games coming into the game here tonight. 187 shots per 60, 200th individual scoring chances for per 60. Yeah, that's about where he lives most of the time. 105 Corsi 4 per 60, 218 on ice scoring chances 4 per 60, 30 goal, 58 point pace for Huberdeau on the year. What's the temperature on Huberdeau now? He kind of had a big hot streak, and people were starting to get a little bit of Huberdeau love back in their sights for fantasy purposes, at least. What do you think the outlook is moving forward?
I don't know, man. Probably more of the same. I mean, I think we're gonna cap out at like a 65 point Jonathan Huberdeau. That's best case scenario. Just Calgary's not that team this year. They it's a bit of a slog in the offensive zone, although Calgary has been great defensively this year. That's a nice piece. Like they've been excellent, right? Really suppressing a lot of shots and chances, but their goals for terrible. They're 30th in the league and they're 24th in the league in finishing. That's according to Jay Fresh's model that he uses there. It's just, yeah, I mean, that's not a great offensive environment. And I think it's been that way since Huberdeau's got here, right? Like
Mm.
55 points in 2022-23, then 52 points, and now he's on a 58 point pace. So this all kind of tracks. I think I like the chemistry he has with Kadri, and now he's playing with Joel Farabee, which I think can be a net positive. But it takes a little while to get used to your new line mate, and we'll see what happens. But the fact is, Jonathan Huberdeau is still one of the best facilitators in the league. It's just he doesn't have a lot of guys to pass to on Calgary, right? And he's not really a dynamic player in terms of like driving offense himself. He's kind of like a one-touch guy. He's really good at kind of just putting players in good positions, but those players still need to score. And Nazem Kadri, shout out to him. He's a good player, but he's a poor finisher. And then now we got Joel Farabee, who's we'll see what that experiment kind of goes like. But yeah, I think 60 points is probably a ceiling for Jonathan Huberdeau here on the season, and that's all right, especially where you probably drafted him or picked him up off waivers.
Yeah. Yeah, he's consistently been under 50% rostered on the season, so it's not like we're doing much more than picking him up here or there. I will say 1852 average time on ice on the season. That would be the
It's
best
better.
that he's done in Calgary by far. Yeah, you'd have to go back to his Florida days. The weird part with Huberdeau that I can't quite get my head around is just that the IVP has been consistent around this like 65% mark in Calgary so far. And prior in Florida with better players, who theoretically should be eating into some of that market share, uh, like 77%, 72%, 71%, 77%. The 4 years prior to getting dealt to Calgary, he
Yep.
was like in on every goal in Florida with much better players. And I can't quite wrap my head around why that can be. Um, Yeah, it feels like one of these years it should pop a little bit more for Huberto just in terms of the offensive involvement, but different styles, I guess, of play. Definitely some things going differently there. But yeah, overall, I tend to agree with the assessment. 60-point pace. He's run hot on the goal scoring, 20.4% shooting percentage. That'll come down, but I think the point pace is about in line. So I tend to agree 60, maybe 65-point pace rest of season feels right for Huberto. Chris Kreider, next up, 1 assist in his last 5, just over 15 minutes average time on ice. This has been quite the fall from grace, at least in terms of fantasy for Chris Kreider. We'll note he was on the power play, so it was Zibanejad, Miller, Kreider, Panarin on the power play in the game here today. Trocheck off the top power play. And he's playing on a Johnny Brodzinski, Will Cooley line at even strength. So,
Woo-wee.
yay, Chris Kreider there. Compounding that factor is if your fantasy playoffs are weeks 22 through 24, the Rangers play 8 games total with 2 off nights. Yeah, just a really, really bad schedule for fantasy purposes in the fantasy playoffs. What's your temperature on Kreider? Are you dropping him? Are you trying to hang on? What do you think we should do with him here?
Kreider can be a drop. There's no question there. Like, I'm not saying you have to drop Kreider because he does have power play 1 on New York. So that's a nice piece to keep him there. But you know who he reminds me of is Stefan Nason. It's
Yeah.
like that's who he is now. I really feel like Chris Kreider has been battling an injury all season. He
Mm-hmm.
had that back injury, and I don't think he's been fully healthy all year. And I think that's evidenced by the ice time and just even just the way he's scoring his goals. Like he's not deflecting goals in the way that he normally does. He's not getting to those dirty areas. And it's been a really rough season for Chris Kreider. And like you said, with the playoff schedule, the deployment, I don't see a reason that you have to hold on to Chris Kreider. Treat him like a Stefan Nason type player, and don't get pick lock on this guy. Like if you drafted him early, like this guy was drafted in the 40s. You remember that? What the
Yeah.
hell was that about? No, this is a guy we obviously called as a major bust this year, just from his draft position. But I still did expect him to get like 60 points. He's not even going to come close this year to that. He's on a 34-point pace right now. So if you need to drop Chris Kreider, happily do it. You have my permission anyway. I don't see how he's coming back here. And like Vincent Trocheck's off the top power play. Vincent Trocheck can do basically what Chris Kreider's doing on the power play if need be. Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of experiment there if the team goes a little bit cold. But yeah, it's not a player that I'm really high on for the rest of the season here.
Yeah, tough to be high on Kreider. I do agree. I think there is that underlying injury that he's missed some time here and there with it throughout the season, and he's just trying to battle through. And he's not the youngest player in the league anymore, and so I'm
Yeah.
sure that's getting harder and harder every year to deal with any kind of underlying thing. And you see it; they're pretty intentionally trying to limit his minutes at this point. So yeah, you can definitely drop Chris Kreider in my books as well if you need to. Lane Hudson showing up here. It's been a terrific season for Lane Hudson, but now 0 points in his last 5 games, still getting the 23-minute a night treatment. Never really shown out too much in terms of the individual shot production, so it's not surprising to see that in the 100s amongst all defensemen in the last 5 games. 32nd in Corsi 4/60 isn't terrible. 78th in on ice scoring chances 4/60, not so great. Still a 5 goal but 62-point pace for Hudson on the season. What do you think about him here? Were we a little bit getting ourselves swept up a little bit in the Lane Hudson hype? Do you think that there's any chance they play around with the top power play units? What's your temperature on this situation in Montreal?
I think there's always a chance when you have a guy like Mike Matheson in the wings. There's a chance because Matheson can do that. And I watched a little bit of the Montreal game here today as well. And Matheson is such a horse. The guy does it all. And it doesn't show up for fantasy right now. It has in the past, but this year, Mike Matheson obviously is muted in fantasy because of Lane Hudson's emergence. But yeah, I feel like, that there's potential there. But that said, Lane Hudson leads the league in rookie scoring. That's nuts. I never would have called that at the beginning of the year. He like 39 points in 52 games. Very nice. Obviously, Macklin Celebrini's had less games. He's had like 10 less games. So he'd probably lead. There's no question there. But it's a nice feather in the cap of Lane Hudson. I think if he finishes the season over 50 points, that's a massive dub, right? You keep in mind, most Cider, he won the Calder Trophy with like 50 points.
Yep.
And Lane Hutson's like he's walking easily into 50 points this year because of his offensive skill, right? So yeah, I mean that all to say, I think that he's a young guy. It makes sense that he's going through a bit of a drought here. Montreal was running hot with their goal scoring. There's no question there. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, maybe not to where it was before. So I would see Hudson as probably like a 50-point pace moving forward if his deployment sticks and he's able to hold power play one.
Yeah, I think you could get maybe back towards 55. Personally, I don't think they're going to move him off power play one as long as Martin St. Louis is the coach. I think they're just living and dying with the young guys there. Don't have much of a reason not to. I mean, the only thing honestly would be if Lane Hudson, like if he goes cold, like stays at 0 points for another 5 games and the power play doesn't score for another 5 games, then sure, yeah, anything can happen at that
Yeah.
point. But that's feels unlikely given what we've seen so far. Brock Faber, last on the list here, also 0 points in his last 5, 0 points in the last 6, I believe, actually. 24.5 minutes average time on ice, so he's still doing that. 179th shots per 60. His best number in all these metrics that we like to look at is 158th in individual scoring chances for per 60 amongst all defensemen.
Ew.
That is not a good number. Clearly, he's being used a little bit more in a defensive role. Jonas Brodin being out has not helped that in any way for sure. So maybe he gets a little bit better with Brodin back in the lineup, but 10 goal, 35-point pace for Faber. I was not in on Faber at all this year. I've said pretty consistently that I view him as a bit more of a do everything guy and not an elite offensive talent. What do you think Faber can do for us moving forward? And have you made any trades around Brock Faber as of late?
Oh, he's setting me up. He's setting me up. I'm about to knock it down. Yeah, I did. I had Brock Faber in the experts league that Nate and I play in, and I was able to trade him and a higher draft pick for Drew Doughty and a lower draft pick. So did sort of a pick swap and was able to secure Doughty, which I think is a win for me. Obviously, I'm losing, moving forward with my picks and stuff. But yeah, I'm exactly with you on Brock Faber. I have no interest in holding this player. He got 47 points last year with Minnesota based on deployment alone. He was just getting a crap ton of deployment out there with great players all the time, and he was just running into some points, but it was never sustainable. And if you look at what he's doing this year, he's almost doubled his shooting percentage. That's crazy. So he's actually running a little bit hot with his goal scoring, but his point pace is down. And I think once those goals stop going in, right, that percentage goes down. Now it's really going to be a muted offensive season for Brock Faber. Great player in real life, but for fantasy, it's not what I'm interested in. And like when you got Jared Spurgeon taking over power play one for you and looking pretty good out there, actually, it just says a lot about kind of what they're expecting from this player. But last thing on Faber too, I do agree with what you said. Jonas Brodin, when they get him back in the lineup, maybe that does unlock Faber's offense just a touch where he could maybe get up to like a 40-point pace. I think if he finished with 40 points, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Don't have much more to add on Faber. Well, if we did not talk about a player that you want to hear about in the Hot Shots or the Have Nots, make sure you join for Monday's 8 p.m. EST live stream Puzzling Players. I'm going to have the one, the only Mr. Guggen himself, Gugsy from
Ooh,
Discord,
Gugsy.
is going to be on with me. So get ready for that chat. It's going to be a good one. 8 p.m. EST every single week on the Apples and Ginos YouTube channel every single Monday. Let's get under the hood, and it is Yuri Coolidge that I want to talk about here. In the 7 games since coming back from injury, he's got 4 goals, 3 assists, 16-21 average time on ice. He's 14th in shots per 60 and 3rd in individual scoring chances for per 60 amongst all NHL players in that span. If you go over to the on ice stats, it still looks good. 41st, Corsi 4 per 60, 24th in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. This is a guy, 2022 first round pick, 28th overall. Last year in the AHL, he scored 27 goals in 57 games, 24 and 62 the year before that. So there's some AHL pedigree at work here as well. And if that's not enough, Blake, the man's jaw could cut glass. So I am all aboard the Yuri Coolidge train. What's your temperature on this guy? Do you think he's going to be a guy for the rest of the season? What do you think the ceiling is? Not even for the season, but for the career here.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, for the season, what is he on? 35-point pace? Yeah, that seems low, but he's just running into some offensive opportunity now. Ooh, rest of season. If he holds this deployment, I think, yeah, we could see a 50-point pace moving forward with this player. I mean, he's a young guy, but he's got access to Tage. Oh, yeah. Big Tage Thompson. So yeah, I like the player, but I mean, for his career, we'll see. They have a bunch of players that kind of do this, don't they? Like Jack Quinn. We were big on Jack Quinn early on in the season, and he's kind of fallen off a little bit. Dylan Cousins, Yuri Kulich, Zach the Butler Benson. They've got a bunch of guys. So I mean, in terms of his career, I feel like the potential is, yeah, this is a guy that can maybe put up 60 to 70 points year to year, but he's got his work cut out for him in Buffalo there just to separate himself from some of these other guys, like that kind of middle six. He's got to separate himself, but it's already, this is a glowing endorsement just having him on the top line, right? And
Yeah.
how he's been able to, like, he does not look out of place. That line has a lot of chemistry, actually. He's not just a passenger. He's making things happen out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. I will note, like, Coolich's profile, you can go back through. He has always, kind of scored more goals than assists. So he's kind of been a little bit more of that mold. Like, he scored 27 and 57 in the AHL last year. He only had 18 assists. So it was 45 points in 57 games. So he has always kind of had that more goals than assists kind of profile to him. So it could be a guy who, like, he does score 30 goals, but maybe he only gets 20 assists, as his kind of ceiling in the NHL. That could be the situation that we're looking at here. But yeah, if he can solidify any kind of spot alongside Tage Thompson, I mean, the power play in my mind in Buffalo is pretty wide open. I don't think they have to be attached to any of the guys they got on there right now, other than Peterka and Thompson, and obviously Darlene on the back end. But yeah, I think there's definitely some room here for Kulich, and these numbers are like insane over this, 7 games. It's a
Yeah,
small
really
sample,
nice.
but 7 games on the top line, and he's doing this with it. That's the way to ingratiate yourself with your coaches for sure. All right, Blake, take it away. Move of the week. What do you got?
You bet, buddy. Just another cautionary tale, as we do here. In my couple league, it's a 14-teamer points league. I had Patty Kane on my IR plus. He became healthy, and I had a full roster of forwards, and I had a decision to make there. So I had to just decide if I wanted to bring him into the lineup or not. And my choices were to bench Patrick Kane, to bench Matty Beniers, or to bench Evgeny Dadonov. And of those three, I elected to bench Dadonov because of the underlying metrics, because of the deployment, right? He was moved from the top line down to the third line. He's power play 2, whereas Kane is power play 1. Beniers is power play 1. So I dug in on some of the metrics, and I sort of, that's how I made my decision. And that's how I usually make my decisions when I'm looking at, sit start decisions, right? The problem is Dadonov popped for 2 goals on my bench. And, it's a close matchup. I feel like I'm going to pull it out, but I could have used those points. That would have been really good. And if I lose it and Dadonov's on the bench, that's really going to sting, right? But it's just kind of I think these are the type of decisions that we have to make every day. And my thought is that you kind of need to trust your process, right? And that's just so you can sleep at night. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. It's like playing lottery tickets. Like I always play the same numbers, because if I don't play those numbers and like I win, or like those numbers win and I didn't play them, I'd be like, what the heck is going on? So it's kind of like a little modicum of control. But I really do like the process that we have for assessing players. And I made a good decision based on an informed decision based on what I know about these players. And you win some and you lose some, right? And I think there's a lot of reactionary moves and things that we do in fantasy hockey. And I think you just got to trust the process. That's what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, you live and die by what you're doing, but you're here, you're listening to Apples and Genos, you're trying to get better at fantasy hockey, just as Nate and I are. And some of these things happen sometimes, and I'm going to live with that, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've said it before, but yeah, we're not trying to be right 100% of the time. I mean, we're trying, but nobody is going to be right 100% of the time. If somebody is telling you that they're right 100% of the time with their fantasy hockey decisions, they're selling you snake oil, and you should back away quickly.
Is that a thing? Snake oil. What do you do with that?
Have you not?
What,
It's
do
a
you put it in your
pretty
hair or
common
something?
idiom.
Is that why you have such a beautiful mustache and long flowing locks? Are you using snake oil, Nate? Because I'm getting a little bit thin here in the back, and would snake oil help that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think that's a different product,
Oh
and
shit.
maybe
Okay.
you can talk to Austin Matthews
All
about
right. Yeah.
that. But
Anybody have any information on that? Just DM me. All right. That's all.
all right. But yeah, just regarding the process, it is a process play, right? To make a decision on who to start, who to add for the week, and the process. If the process is right, even 60% of the time, then that's a win on the course of the year. And it may not come through in that exact moment when you need it to, but are you just gonna like the alternative is just like flipping a coin or like
That's
going with your
anarchy.
gut
Yeah.
or like yeah, what is the alternative here, right? So yeah, you got to trust the process, especially if the process is yielding results in terms of the big picture on the season. For myself, I'm trying to get into a spot with some of these teams that are doing well where I can just kind of constantly be ahead on my ads. So in Kakupful, I got ahead pretty early on the week, pretty big. And so I had made two ads early in the week and I just decided I wasn't going to make any moves. I could have made a few moves here or there to, I mean, it's a 16 team league. So there are not going to
Yeah.
be massive moves to really shake up
Nick
the league
Jensen
by any
available?
stretch. Yeah, exactly. So I held those two ads, and I just kind of by the time Saturday rolled around, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. I was up like 70 points or something on the matchup. And so I took a look ahead and I made some moves. Ridley Gregg and Keandre Miller, that's what I'm looking at. It's a points league, and I'm adding these guys to try to really win my week next week. But these are guys that I can get in for two games played before Friday or including Friday next week. And that's going to really set me up nicely for next week. And I want to be in this position in an ideal scenario where, I can use two ads ahead of time to be constantly ahead like this. And that's how you can really get ahead if you get into a bit of a roll and you're winning weeks comfortably and you can really use those ads ahead of time. That's a really good way to just kind of start the snowball for yourself and get going that way. So I think sometimes people, they can start to feel like, oh, I got to maximize my points for on the week or something like that. And I just think that sometimes people get caught up on the points for a little bit and they forget that you're trying to win a week every single week. And they'll like, cry about how good their points for is and that they're not getting lucky. Partially true for sure. Everybody has leagues where that happens. Like the points for doesn't match what the record is. I'm in a spot like that in the Fantasy Puck
Yeah.
League this year. But also, I think you got to own for yourself. Like, I probably could have made some better moves along the way to try to win individual weeks here and there and really focus down those weeks. So, yeah, I just want to reiterate if you're in a spot where you're ahead big, then you really should just put the brakes on. Don't think about being optimal with your games played for the rest of the week. Just put the brakes on. If you're ahead big, you can always add later in the week if you have to. Maybe it's slightly less optimal than it would be earlier in the week, but you can still use those ads for this week. But if you can get to a spot where you're using those ads ahead of time, you can start to build this snowball for yourself where you're consistently using them ahead and you're getting the drop on your league mates on those ads for each week.
Oh yeah.
All right, last order of business here is the head to head streamer deathmatch. And I wrote this up. I wrote on here, if you're looking on YouTube, somebody wins. Before the game here tonight between Calgary and Seattle, I had Yuri Sharangovich. You had Matty Beniers. Beniers had 9.75 points going into this game. And Yuri Sharangovich had basically not shown up at all. He had 2.25 points, less than a point per game in all these games. So we are at the end of two in the Calgary Seattle game. Beniers has 0.25 points. He has registered one hit on the night. That brings him up to
Thank
an
you.
even 10 points.
Love
And
that.
Sharangovich, what do we got? Sharangovich has goal and an assist in this game. He has scored 9 points, nine cacuffle points, 11.25. So I'm slightly ahead, but we still have a
Oh,
period left. I'm gonna have to update the people later, I guess, Blake. We can't call it right now. But Igor Sharangovich was never in doubt.
yeah, oh my God. I trust in Matty Beniers. He's not going to let me down. All right. He
Okay.
can't let it end this way. Puck don't lie, Nate. All right.
All right. We will see. Well, if you made it this far, you should click the link in the description. Join the Apples and Genos Discord community, 1,500 plus managers in there talking fantasy all day, every day. While you're here, like, rate, review, subscribe, comment really does help us out, but that's going to be all that we've got for this episode. So hopefully it brought you some value. Helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource.
Mhm.
Many thanks to the band there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.